against the background of what we have already said, it's easy for us to perceive that femininity comes from God's loving hand. And the glorious mission that God has given woman is a gracious, loving blessing. So far we have seen that woman has been created for intimacy, beauty, and adventure. And tonight we're going to see that woman has been created for motherhood. When God made Adam and Eve, He called them man. God made Adam and Eve and He called them man, as in mankind. When Adam saw his wife for the very first time, he called her woman, for she was taken out of man. But after they sinned, and God had laid the curse of sin upon Adam and Eve and the entire earth, Adam names his wife Eve. So Eve is given the title as being a part of mankind. She is given the name woman. And after the curse, Adam calls her Eve because she was the mother of the living. Now here's the question. What is the significance of the name Eve, and how does it relate to womanhood and to motherhood? Turn with me to Genesis chapter 3, verse 20. That's where you'll see the text, the reference that I just made. The man called his wife's name Eve. It could actually be a title. Mother of the living. Eve, we're so used to referring it as like her first name, as if, her first name was Eve, woman Eve. Eve was, look at it very much as a title. Mother of the living. Now, when you read this, it seems to kind of be out of nowhere. You read it and you're like, wait. This doesn't seem to be a good place for this verse to go. I mean, we just got told that death has now entered into humanity. And because of sin, Adam and Eve are going to die. And everything on earth is going to die. And it's out of that Adam then says, "You're Eve, mother of the living." Wait a minute, you just got told the entire time that now people are going to die. So it seems that this is strange that Adam would say this right here, following on the heels of the curse. But God put this verse where He put this verse for a reason. And we may just have to look a little bit closer to find out the reason. Now, 5 verses before verse 20, we have verse 15. Look with me at verse 15. So God is cursing the serpent. And in the midst of cursing the serpent, we have this statement: "I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. You shall bruise his heel, and he will crush your head." So in the midst of the cursings, you do have this verse that's thrown in the middle of it. These are deliberate, encouraging words from God. I love the fact that when God is even pouring out His judgment was mixed with grace. And it was mixed with mercy. And in the midst of this judgment, as Adam and Eve are listening to the serpent being cursed and being judged, they hear verse 15 and it gives them encouragement. It gives them hope. Not only would woman not die immediately. Remember, what was the warning God gave? Eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and you will surely die. They probably were thinking, well, that's it. Here comes the death. God's now going to judge us. We're dead. However, the fact that in verse 15 we have, "and the woman will have offspring." All of a sudden now they realize, wait, we're not dying immediately. In fact, we're going to have children. That was significant. It was significant to the fact that Eve and Adam were going to have children. which means that physical death was not imminent right then on the spot. Her offspring would deliver them from the devil. Her offspring would redeem them so that motherhood and mankind would be saved. That is the context that Adam calls his wife Eve. I believe we have verse 20 because there's hope in the midst of this cursing. You're mother of the living, Eve. We're going to have children. We're not dead. There is going to be redemption through you. Now, we also have evidence that they were thinking this way when you flip to chapter 4, verse 1. Now, Adam knew his wife. Again, that does not mean that he knew about her. Okay? He had relations with his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. Now, James Montgomery Boyce, he died the turn of the century, Presbyterian pastor. He wrote that when Eve finally conceives and bears Cain, both she and Adam thought that he was the deliverer. Basically, they thought Cain was Jesus. Now think about it. Because they were just told in the cursings, your offspring, the woman's offspring, will crush the devil and deliver. So in their minds, when she bears Cain, she thinks, this is it. This is the deliverer. Now, James Montgomery Boyce, he says that the name Cain means to bring forth. And he says that's the literal meaning of the word of the Hebrew. And he said, but if we were to translate this into everyday speech, it would mean I've got him or he is here. It means he's here. We've got him. James Montgomery Boyce believed that the Hebrew meant here that she had brought forth the promised one. Eve thought, I am in fact the mother of the living. I have now, my offspring has been born. He is here. We're saved. Now, of course, they were wrong. And it didn't take long before Cain proved that. But this gives us an insight into the mindset of motherhood. Motherhood was to bring life. Through motherhood would come salvation and redemption. Alice von Hildebrandt writes, there is a metaphysical bond between womanhood and life. And this is an honor indeed. Eve, Adam, looks at his wife and says, you are the mother of the living. In a world of the dying, you're the mother of the living. Life will come from you. Now, how is this going to happen? How is this life coming? Well, there is another gift that God has given woman. It is the gift of receptivity or receiving. The life given of motherhood first comes from being receptive. Now, let's not confuse being receptive with being passive. Okay? Aristotle made this mistake. Aristotle believed because man is the active and woman is the passive, that man is the superior. All right? Aristotle was wrong. Receiving is not passivity. You're not passive if you receive. All right? Now, here's what I mean by that. Receptivity involves being alert, being awakened, and having joyful readiness to take what is given. So we may say that woman's receptivity is self-giving. When a woman receives, she receives willfully in a self-giving manner. Biologically speaking, the woman, in the act of sexual intercourse, the woman receives. She does not receive passively. She receives. In other words, it is her giving herself to what's being given. That makes sense? The woman is receiving. This is both biological, it is spiritual, and it is emotional. That is why the whole idea of sex just being a biological function is ridiculous. It is spiritual, it is emotional. Motherhood is also receptive in nature because hours after sex, the woman's seed receives the sperm. And in that moment, woman receives another living being into her body. So a woman receives her husband, her egg receives the sperm, and then her body receives this new life. Being receptive. Now, let me ask you a question. Is that being passive? No. These are all things that are taken on willfully, as I said earlier, willfully, alert, awakened. Think on this. God made a woman to accept a man, a sperm, and a living being through sex. A new scientific study found in mice that when sperm impregnates the egg of a female, a zinc spark is given off. Literally a light is given off by this zinc spark. This caused researchers at Northwestern University to wonder, you think this happens with humans? You think that when a sperm and an egg meet, you think a zinc spark is given off at the moment of conception? So they began to do studies, and guess what they found? That yes, indeed, when a sperm enters an egg at the moment of conception, there is literally a spark that is given off. And life begins when? At conception. When that spark happens. It's like God going, ding, baby, ding, baby. A zinc ding. Now, while man and woman are involved in the biological process that produces a human being, it is God who gives life. It is God who gives that baby at the moment of conception a soul, a spirit. It is not simply a biological process. Conception is a spiritual thing, not simply just a biological thing. God creates the human soul. And the soul is implanted into the woman by God. The soul was not planted there by man. The soul was not planted there by woman. The soul was planted there by God. That's why Genesis 4:1, she says, I have gotten a son with the help of God. This wasn't just me and Adam involved in this thing. God is the one who brought this life about. God is the one who brought that zinc spark when they had no clue that there was even a zinc spark. The Lord is the author of life and death. But it is woman who receives the life into herself. What a wonderful privilege God has given woman. During pregnancy, she carries two souls in her body. Think of that. That's why husbands, there's a bond that we just... I remember when Caden was born, I mean, this was my son. I had unresolved anxiety issues at the time, looking back on it. And my wife goes, but there was a connection that her and Caden already had that I had to build. Because she was carrying around that soul for 9 months. I didn't do that. I was engaging that soul once he was born. She had been engaging that soul in herself from the moment of conception. What a wonderful privilege God has given woman in being a mother. Receiving motherhood into herself. Let us also think of the birth process. Now, we usually don't think of birth as being a woman receiving. Usually we think of birth as woman giving, right? She's giving birth. But hang on a second. As soon as that baby is born, what happens to that baby? They take that baby, and where do they put that baby? Immediately on the bosom of the mother. Unless there is something that is medically wrong with that child is born and then given immediately to the mother. And what do we see in all the videos where the dad's holding the camera, right, or the dad's snapping the picture, and the mom is there? What immediately happens? She takes that baby and she receives that baby unto herself. And shortly after, she begins nursing. She gives birth, but she is receiving that child unto herself in a way that she has never been able to do before. By her womanhood, or by her motherhood, woman outranks man. Listen, women are tough. I mean, oh yeah. Listen, my wife was in labor, and my anxiety issues had me in the bathroom vomiting. People were coming into the hospital room, and I'm sitting there sick to my stomach, and they're like, "Neil, you okay?" And she's like, "I'm the one giving birth here. Why are you checking on him?"
You told her about it.
Oh yeah, show me what you did. Repented of all that, guys. What great dignity comes from a woman who receives motherhood unto herself. I want to talk for a minute about the homemaker. Women in the West need to rediscover the beauty and the dignity of the home. Home should be a place of love and rest and peace and unity. I want you to think for a moment how many homes in the West are not ones of love and peace and unity and rest. They're anything but. While there is absolutely nothing wrong with a mother working outside of the home, it must be said and understood that their first and foremost calling is to be a homemaker. So you can work outside the home and you're still a homemaker. You can have an outside of the home career, but you are still to be a homemaker. Titus chapter 2, verse 3. I want to point something out here to you. Titus chapter 2, verse 3 says this: "Older women likewise are to be reverent in behavior, not slanderers or slave to much wine. They are to teach what is good, and so train the young women to love their husbands and their children, to be controlled, pure," and the Greek can literally read busy at home or working at home, "kind and submissive to their own husbands, that the word of God may be reviled." Here, as Paul is telling Timothy what to teach the women of his church, he wants the older women to teach the younger women how to be busy at home, how to be homemakers, how to take care of their children and their home, and to love their husbands. This is an awesome task. This is a task that mothers have taken upon themselves through the ages. Home is a place where husband and wife can find comfort and peace, and children know that they are loved. It should sadden us immensely that in the West, motherhood is often relinquished through abortion, abandonment, or taking a back seat to an outside of the home career. Let me again state, having an outside of the home career is perfect and fine. It should never take a back seat to you being a mother and a homemaker. Gertrude von Lefort wrote in her book, The Eternal Woman, "Motherhood is God's tenderness brought down to earth." Think about that. Motherhood is God's tenderness brought down to earth, and it should never take a backseat to anything. Motherhood and homemaking is the most fulfilling gift God has given woman. She is a life giver. She is a self-sacrificer. I think that's a proper word, but in motherhood, woman participates in the adventure that we talked about last week, filling the earth with God's presence. That is what God has called moms to do with their children. To teach their children the things of God, so that as the population grows and as Christians are making Christians of their children, those children then take the truth all over the world, filling the earth with God's presence. Let me end with another quote from Alice von Hildebrand. Women play such a crucial role in both society and in the church that the wily devil is now waging a fierce war on femininity and particularly on the greatness of motherhood. He is the mastermind behind the philosophy of feminism, the philosophy that selects maternity as its main target, convincing modern Eves that it is one great obstacle preventing women from developing their talents and reaching transcendence and self-fulfillment. I would just add to that. Biblically speaking, there is nothing more self-fulfilling than a woman being a homemaker. You say, wait a minute, Neil, so you're saying all women should be homemakers? Absolutely. If you're a mother, you should be a homemaker. Work your job. Have your career. It cannot take a back seat to being a homemaker. The mission that God has given woman is expressed in the word mother. Think about that. Just let me restate that, because a question should pop in your mind. The mission God has given women, the mission God has given women, is best expressed in the word mother. And here's the question that pops into my mind. Okay, well, what about those women who never marry? Or what about those women who are barren? Can they not partake in this divine privilege? I love what John Eldridge wrote. The word mother is more powerful when it is used as a verb than a noun. What he means by that is not all women are mothers, noun. But all women are called to mother. As daughters of Eve, all women are uniquely gifted to help others in their lives, to encourage, to nurture, and to mother them. All women are to participate with Christ in the vital mission of bringing forth life. Unmarried women should have spiritual children. Married couples who carry the cross of barrenness and are not able to have children don't then have an excuse not to have children, either spiritual or through adoption. Those who would thrive on their love and dedication. So here's my point. My point is this. Every woman is called to mother. Every woman. Whether you have biological children or not, you have been called to mother. To take in children and to mother them. Doesn't mean necessarily take them into your home, but take them into yourself. To pour yourself out to them. To take the unique gifts that God has given you and to then display that and pour that onto children, so that every time I think about this, the first person that comes to my mind is Linda Nelson. Mm-hmm. Who went to be with the Lord, 4 years ago? This summer will be 4 years that she went to be with the Lord. We are still ministering to teenagers who were in her 6th grade class at school, who then she reconnected with them when they got in high school and junior high, and picked them up, in fact, a whole group would meet at her little, what do they call those buildings that aren't really attached? There's like a portable. Yeah, portable. Yeah, but what are those buildings they call? They move them all around. What are those portable buildings? What do they call those things? They would all meet at her portable, right by her door. And she would load them up in her car, and she would bring them up here, and she'd drop them off with me. And then she would go and make other rounds, and she'd pick up kids, and she'd bring them here with me. And those children, those kids became her children. They were her spiritual children. I think of one who you guys see around here all the time. Her name's Kylie. Kylie was the very first one that Linda started pouring herself into. In 9th grade, Kylie started failing like every class. And Linda would not stand for it. She wasn't going to let it happen. She would pick her up after school. They would go to the library together. She would buy her dinner. They would eat dinner. She would go over her studies, and then she'd take her home. This happened day after day after day. Today, I found out on Wednesday that not only is Callie graduating on Saturday, but she's been taking AP classes and just succeeding. And I thought, man, if it wasn't for Linda, that never would have happened. Linda had a view that said, I may not have my own biological children, but God has called me to mother. God has called me to have spiritual children and to minister and to love and to pour myself into them. In fact, I would say she gave her life for them. No one will ever convince me that the reason why she had a heart attack and died was because she was so given to those kids that when those kids had trouble, she put it on herself. She literally gave her life for those kids. Don't tell me she was not a mother, simply because they were not her biological children. In Mark chapter 10, verse 29 and 30, Jesus says that those who give up family for the kingdom of God will be given 100-fold in this age and the next. Elizabeth Elliot was once asked, How may a single woman enter into the meaning of motherhood if she can have no children? She answered, she can have children. She, by the very offering of her singleness, transforms for the good far more children than a natural mother may produce. All is received and made holy by the one to whom it is offered. C.S. Lewis, how many of you ever read his book, The Great Divorce? Get The Great Divorce. Read it. It is a fictional story about life after death. And in this life after death, C.S. Lewis is narrating in the first person. He gets to meet all these people and all these things happen. And it's just so many lessons that are taught. And in one section, he's being led around by the teacher, capital T, is showing him around when they encounter a woman of stunning beauty. Here's how it goes. It's someone you'll never have heard of. Her name on earth was Sarah Smith, and she lived at Golden Green. She seems to be, well, a person of particular importance. Aye, she is one of the great ones. Ye have heard that fame in this country and fame on the earth are two quite different things. And who are all these young men and young women on each side of her? They are her sons and daughters. Well, she must have had a large family, sir. Every young man or boy that met her became her son, even if it was only the boy that brought meat to her back door. Every girl that she met was her daughter. Let me give you one more example. This example is from real life. Most of us know of Corrie ten Boom, who helped protect Jews during the Holocaust. But she was involved in amazing ministry before the Holocaust. Corrie ten Boom and her sister Betsy were single. They never married. In 1923, as a means of sharing their faith, they started a club for girls. This club for girls quickly began to grow. So they decided to stop it from just being girls to letting it be girls and guys, which was unheard of at the time. The reason why she started this was because Sunday school would end by the time you got to be a teenager. So there would not be religious teachings in the manner that they had received them when they turned to be a teenager. So what, by the way, Sunday school was started, like Southern Baptist, it was actually started in the late 1700s. Moore, what's her name? Hannah Moore started Sunday school kind of like this. What she started doing is on Sundays, she began teaching on Sundays adults, first and foremost. She began teaching them education, and then she would work in religious education, and it started spreading. And that's kind of where Sunday school started. And then Christians started picking that up and thought, well, what a great opportunity to do religious education on Sundays. The people aren't going to be working. We can get them in here to the church. We can do religious education. So what happened is Corrie ten Boom started this for girls who became teenagers when Sunday school would stop. So she kept it going. Then she opened it up, and her sister started doing this for teenage girls and boys. We might even call it a youth ministry. While the clubs were thriving, she began holding religious services for children with intellectual challenges. By the early 1930s, Corrie's large family had either been married off or passed away. Only her sister Betsy, and their father were left in the home. The quiet did not last long, however. They agreed to take 7 children of missionaries whose parents were sent to work abroad. So instead of being put in a boarding house, they came and lived with the ten Booms. 7 children. This period of her life was so filled with joy that 50 years later, listen to what she writes about it. Our quiet, thin little 3-story house was suddenly stretching its walls and echoing with the activity of children. The side door swung in and out like pendulum of one of our clocks, and it was a good sound. Although Betsy and I never married, we received such love from all our children, and we were able to give them so much of ours. Not all women have been called to be biological mothers, but all women have been called to mother. It is the very essence of womanhood.